It starts with a bite. Small. Maybe you don't even notice it. A wolf that wandered too close to camp. A fox that bit when it should have run. You clean the wound. You forget about it. Weeks pass. Then one night you can't sleep. Your skin feels wrong. Too sensitive. Even a breeze against your arm feels like fire. You're thirsty. Desperately thirsty. But when you try to drink, your throat locks. It refuses. Water terrifies you now, and you don't know why. This is 20,000 years ago. There is no name for what's happening to you. There is only fear, spreading through the camp faster than the illness itself. Because in a few days, you will not be you anymore. And everyone around that fire already knows it. Today, we call this disease rabies, one of the oldest, most consistently terrifying diseases humans have ever documented. And unlike many ancient illnesses, this one leaves almost no trace in bones. No fractures, no deformities, nothing for archaeologists to dig up thousands of years later. Written records, much later than the Ice Age, describe a disease that matches rabies almost exactly. Ancient Mesopotamian laws, dating back roughly 4,000 years, specifically mention the danger of dogs that bite and cause madness in people. But the virus itself is believed by scientists to be far older than any written record, likely circulating in mammal populations for tens of thousands of years. If ancient humans lived alongside wolves, foxes, and wild dogs for tens of thousands of years, before domestication even began, did they already know this fear in some instinctive way? We don't have direct proof, but the pattern is hard to ignore. So what is actually happening inside the body? Here's what modern science tells us. Rabies is caused by a virus that enters through a bite and travels slowly along the nerves, heading directly toward the brain. This is why the incubation period can last weeks, sometimes months. The virus isn't attacking instantly, it's traveling. Once it reaches the brain and symptoms begin, survival is extremely rare, even with all of modern medicine available. That single fact is what made this disease so uniquely terrifying then and now. There is a window to stop it. And once that window closes, there is almost nothing left to do. Now let's really sit inside what this disease actually does to a person, because this is where it stops being biology and starts being a nightmare. At first, almost nothing. A little fever, a little fatigue. Then the wound that is already healed starts to burn again from the inside, because the virus has arrived and is climbing toward the brain. Then the senses turn against you. A whisper sounds like a scream. A candle flame feels like staring into the sun. A light breeze on the skin feels like being dragged across gravel. Then the spasms begin. Sudden, violent, uncontrollable. Arriving without warning in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a meal, in the middle of someone simply trying to sit still. Then comes hydrophobia, the fear of water. Not because the person doesn't want to drink, because the mere sight of water, the mere sound of it, can trigger throat spasms so violent they leave a person gasping, thrashing, terrified of the one thing their body desperately needs. And then, the cruelest part. The mind starts to slip. A person may recognize their family one moment and seem terrified of them the next. They may reach for someone they love and then flinch away from that same hand seconds later, as if they no longer know whose hand it is. Hallucinations, confusion, sudden bursts of aggression in someone who was never aggressive a single day in their life. To ancient people, watching this with no explanation available, this would not have looked like sickness. It would have looked like something else entirely wearing their loved one's face. There was no cure. Not then, not for thousands of years after. But that doesn't mean ancient people did nothing. Evidence from many ancient and traditional cultures shows attempts to treat bite wounds immediately, washing them, cauterizing them with fire, and packing them with plant material believed to draw out poison. Some of this instinct wasn't entirely wrong. Modern medicine confirms that immediately and thoroughly washing a bite wound can genuinely reduce transmission risk, one of the few pieces of ancient first instinct that holds up under real science. But once symptoms actually began, there was nothing left to try. Ancient healers turned to fire when medicine had already failed. Ancient communities turned to prayer when there was nothing left to give. They didn't have a cure, so they built a ritual instead, something to hold on to when the disease had already decided the ending. Here's where the story connects directly to today, because rabies never actually went away. Even now, rabies has not disappeared. Tens of thousands of people still die from it every year, the vast majority after dog bites in regions without fast access to medical treatment. Picture this. Right now, in a small village somewhere in rural South Asia or sub-Saharan Africa, a child is bitten by a stray dog. That child is facing, in this exact moment, almost the identical danger an Ice Age hunter faced 20,000 years ago. The virus hasn't changed. The threat hasn't changed. The only thing standing between that child and the same fate as our ancient hunter is whether a vaccine reaches them before the symptoms begin. That's the entire story of rabies, compressed into one sentence. The difference between an ancient death and a modern survival was never the disease itself. It's whether help arrives before the window closes. Where treatment is available, doctors act immediately. A person bitten by a potentially rabid animal is given a series of vaccinations along with rabies immune globulin before symptoms ever have the chance to begin. Caught in time, it works. The danger today comes down to one single factor: speed. Ancient healers used fire to seal a wound. Modern doctors use a vaccine to stop a virus before it ever reaches the brain. Ancient communities prayed the sickness away because there was nothing else left to do. Modern medicine attacks the virus directly, days before the first symptom ever appears. Ancient tribes had only isolation to offer, pulling away from what they couldn't explain. Modern hospitals offer post-exposure treatment, closing the window the ancient world never even knew existed. The seriousness of this disease never changed in 20,000 years. What changed was how much time stood between a bite and a life saved. But for ancient families, none of this knowledge existed. There was no clinic, no 12-hour guidance, only a wound, a wait, and the terrible uncertainty of not knowing which bites meant nothing and which ones meant everything. And this is where the real question sits, the one no medicine could ever answer for them. Imagine your brother has been bitten. You know he may die. You know that before he dies, he may become someone you no longer recognize. You know he may lash out, without meaning to, at the very people trying to help him. So what do? Do you tie him down to protect the others and watch fear take over someone you love while he's still able to see your face? Do you leave him somewhere apart, alone, because the risk to the rest of the group is too great to ignore? Or do you stay, knowing exactly what might happen, because the thought of him facing this alone is somehow worse than the danger itself? There was no right answer. Every choice cost something. Every choice was, in its own way, a form of love, even the ones that looked like abandonment from the outside. Every instinct built over hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution would have screamed one word: distance. And yet, evidence from burial sites across multiple ancient cultures continues to show something remarkable. People cared for the dying, even when the dying became difficult, confusing, frightening to be near. Scientists have a name for the instinct that made ancient people pull away from the sick and the strange: the behavioral immune system, a set of psychological reflexes that evolved specifically to help humans avoid disease before it ever reached the body. You still carry this today. It's why a stranger acting erratically on the street makes you tense before you've even consciously registered why. But rabies reveals the tragic flaw hiding inside that same system, because the very people this instinct told you to avoid were often the ones who needed you the most. So, what was rabies really for ancient humans? It wasn't just a wound from an animal bite. It was a test, the kind with no correct answer, of how a small, fragile human community responded when one of their own became someone they no longer recognized. Some communities likely failed that test, and understandably so. Fear is not weakness. Fear kept people alive for hundreds of thousands of years. But some chose something harder. They chose to stay close to a fear they didn't understand, for the sake of someone they loved. And somewhere deep in your own instincts, the same old alarm system is still running today, quietly telling you to pull away from anything strange, anything sick, anything unpredictable. And somewhere in you, hopefully, is also the same old choice your ancestors sometimes made, and that a child in a village somewhere in the world might be depending on someone making right now, to stay anyway.